notre dernière présentation de la soirée. Présentation un peu particulière, elle sera faite en anglais, avec Sagar que nous voyons apparaître à l'écran. Et donc du coup, je vais introduire cette présentation en anglais. So, hi everyone, welcome to the ParisTestConf. This will be our last presentation for tonight. A few housekeeping items before we start. The presentation will be 30 to 40 minutes. It will be followed by a 15-minute question and answer session. The presentation will be recorded. The slides and the recording will be available to you in a few days. You will be able to ask questions during the presentation. For this, please use the Q&A window of Zoom. This is where we will pick the questions. And last item, you are able to watch in parallel the slides and the speaker thanks to Zoom. So don't hesitate to use this feature. It's more comfortable. For our last talk tonight, I'm pleased to introduce Sagar Uday Kumar. Sagar is the automation lead at Dashlane, and he manages a team of 6 engineers. And he has a passion for QA processes and release pipelines automation. So that's what he's going to talk to us about tonight, the QA stages at Dashlane's release pipeline. So, Sagar.
Thanks a lot, Arnaud.
I will stop my sharing so that you can share your presentation.
Yeah, sure. Yes.
Yeah.
So I hope I'm audible and you can see my screen.
That's perfect.
Great. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Bonsoir à tous. I'm Sagar Uday Kumar, as Arnaud presented, and I'm going to present you the QA stages in the release pipeline at Dashlane. So I hope my stick is working today, yes. The agenda of today's talk, I will first briefly introduce about myself and about Dashlane, and then I will talk about the tech stack that we have at Dashlane and the release process that we follow, and the QA and automation stages in the release process, and also how about scaling the test infrastructure. So let's start maybe with my quick introduction. I joined Dashlane as a first automation engineer, and I joined Dashlane about 4.5 years ago. And today I manage the automation team, which is distributed across different offices. Before Dashlane, I had some experiences on the development and also on the automation. So I'm just curious to know how many of you know Dashlane. If you know Dashlane, feel free to send a wave in the chat so that I know you know Dashlane. So for those who don't know, we build a password manager which helps you to manage your identity and your payments in a simple and secure way. And a couple of disclaimers before I start this talk. So today, out of this test pyramid, we will only be concentrating on the end-to-end test and the manual test. Even though we have a lot of integration tests and unit tests at Dashlane, we don't talk about it today. However, I will also talk about the different end-to-end tests that we have, like the performance, the security tests, and other end-to-end tests. And I will talk in detail about those topics. So another disclaimer, what I'm explaining you today is something that works for us, that may not necessarily work for you. Even at Dashlane, if I have to be honest, like something that works in one platform doesn't work in another platform. So it depends on the complexity of the platform. It depends on the available resources, tools, and a lot of other factors. So if you plan to implement it, make sure that you make a small case study and see if you can adapt it to your company and your platforms. So let's look at different platforms that we have. At Dashlane, we need to take care of the QA and automation for the applications on all these platforms. When I say all these platforms, we have the native applications like for Mac, Windows, Android, and iOS OS. And also we have a lot of web applications. We have a lot of browser extensions and we have web applications. Even when it comes to web application, we have B2B web applications and B2C web applications. And we also have the Dashlane website. So it's we are responsible for taking care of the quality of the on many platforms. At the same time, to make it more complicated and interesting at the same time, we have the zero knowledge architecture, which means we don't have access to any of our user data. So if we find a bug in production, then we are mostly screwed, because like we cannot fix them on the server side most of the times. So whenever we find a production bug, we have to make sure that we release a new native client application through stores or like through different avenues, because like for Apple, it has its own store, and for Google, it has its own store. So it takes a complicated process. It takes a long process. So it's not really simple. So it's really costly for us to compromise on the quality. So we should be extra careful at Dashlane. Let's see. So as we have different platforms, like we have different tools and technologies and languages that support for each platforms, and I will let you have a look. I will not get into details of each one of them. I think I don't have enough time to go in details, but if you have any question, feel free to drop a message. Feel free to ask your questions on the chat. I can come back to the slide and I can answer your questions in the end. So I will be moving on to the next slide, but feel free to ask questions in the chat. So at first, what I would like to do is I would like to give you a generic overview about our release process and explain you the different release process that we have at Dashlane and associated testing. So the first phase is what we call as pre-alpha phase. Sometimes you can also call it as a feature development phase, where the application development happens, like the enhancement happens, usually inside the agile teams. At this point, the feature is normally validated by the QA in the agile team. Like the feature validation will happen, and once the feature is completed, it will be merged to master, and then like scheduled release candidate creation will be there. It varies from platform to platform. During the release creation process, we create the release candidate, and for which we will have the release validation. And then once the release validation is successful, we will roll out to alpha phase. And alpha phase at Dashlane is mostly the internal employees. And there is also beta phase, like where it will be tested by limited beta users. And then it will be rolled out to production. And even when we roll out to production, we do the rollout in a progressive manner, which means like we roll out to 1% of the users, 5%, 20, and 100% of the users. Like when we do this progressive rollout, we constantly gather the feedback. We constantly look for exceptions. If there are any exceptions, we'll stop the release there and we will analyze the exceptions, and we will try to roll back our application to the previous version to make sure that we don't impact many users. So we can identify the issues as soon as possible in the release pipeline. So as a first step, let's focus on the pre-alpha phase and how does it work at the pre-alpha phase. So as a quick reminder, like this differs from platform to platform, and this is a very generic release process because every platform has its own platform release strategy and like a platform gateway as well. So it's generic. So to help you better understand the problems that we had in the pre-alpha phase, I would like to take you back to 2019, where we had the automation engineers and the automation team, like which was solely responsible for increasing the test coverage. So we had the master branch, And the automation engineers were responsible for increasing coverage. They were the one who were adding the test. And in case if the tests were broken, it was again automation engineers who were responsible for fixing these broken tests. So it was good, like it was working well for us for a long time. And as long as our team was of small size, it was good. And then in May 2019, we had Series D funding at Dashlane. And with this funding, it accelerated our company growth. We almost doubled our company size, and we also doubled our offices. Before, like we had just one office in Paris and New York, and now we have a new office in Lisbon, and we increased our office in Paris into 3, and we expanded our New York office as well. So it was great, but it had its consequences, which I'll explain. As a consequence, now we had a lot of development branches, and a lot of development branches were constantly getting merged to master. So it was okay, but these new mergers which were happening, which were breaking our automation tests. So it was a nightmare for automation engineers to fix all these broken tests and take care of the maintenance. So again, as a consequence of that, like we had a very low coverage, we had very high maintenance, and the bugs were identified too late in the release pipeline. So as the bugs were identified too late, like we had a lot of hot fix to do, and the release validation process was taking a long time, and the devs had to do a lot of back and forth between the master branch and the release branch and their development branch. So it was not an easy process. At the same time, it also led to release delays because of all these things. So as a solution, we plan to introduce automation with development as our strategy. To introduce this strategy, we had like 4 main elements. One is to have more knowledge sharing. Another one is to introduce automation in the development branches. And then to consider automation as part of definition of done for the new features. And then to have automation consultant in the agile teams. I'll explain you in details about all these elements because all of them will help you to get a complete picture. So about sharing knowledge, as part of the sharing knowledge, we started doing automation onboardings. So we started doing mini training sessions. The mini training session was like sometimes for the whole company and sometimes for the QAs, sometimes for developers and product managers. And we also had dedicated automation workshops where like we gave some exercise for people to do the automation exercises with some bounty bugs, like you have some bugs which you have to recognize and fix the bugs. It was an interesting thing to do this kind of experiment. And then we did some paid programming sessions. And we mainly did this paid programming session with developers in the agile teams. And we did a lot of debugging sessions with developers. I think this really helped us and helped the developers to make them comfortable with the automation code. And the next thing was to introduce automation in the development branch. So what we did is like we introduced 2 kinds of tests in the development branch. As soon as the developer creates the merge request, it would trigger the smoke subset. Well, the smoke test, as you all know, like it is the testing the critical features, and the smoke subset would trigger all these critical tests on the merge request, and it will run all the tests. If the tests are failing, it will block the build. If the tests are passing, it will continue. And from this point, from the merge request, for every commit from then the developer does, it will trigger the smoke subset, and the smoke test subset has to pass in order to continue. Okay, now the merge request is great. He attended all the commits, like he attended all the comments and made all the commits, and now it is ready to merge. So now the developer clicks on the merge button. So as soon as he clicks on the merge button, it will trigger the regression subset. So it will run all the regression subset. If the regression subset is successful, if the pipeline is green, it will merge all the tests to master, and then it will trigger the full regression set. Let's say if the regression subset was a failure, like if the tests are failing, then the pipeline will not be merged and it will be blocked. So the branch is not merged to master. So the developer has to fix the code before he can merge his branch to master. So here you can see like we decreased a lot of maintenance effort on the master branch by introducing automation in the development branch. It is really effective. It is a bit of pain for developers, I would say, but it's really effective for the company and for the process. And the second part was to introduce automation as part of definition of done for the new features. So what we did is like we set the expectations for the new feature development. So whenever someone is creating a new feature, developing a new feature, the addition of the happy part test should be part of the definition of done. So we don't expect the developers to add all the tests, all the edge cases. We only expect the developers to add the basic scenarios and to add the happy path scenarios. So we expect them to add that, like as you can see in this example, like there is automation addition as part of the definition of done. So the developer, it forces the developer to add the automation test, and it will help in sharing the ownership of automation inside the machine team, and also in the and also having the support from others other than the automation engineers. So the next step, which was the main step, I would say, is to introduce automation consultant in the Agile teams. Before, as I explained you, the automation team was an isolated, separate team. But now, like we have automation consultant in each Agile teams. Like we have a dedicated automation consultant. So the automation consultant were the one who were facilitating the automation efforts in these Agile teams. They were the point of contact for all the automation needs. For example, if the developer needs something, like they can just talk to this automation consultant. If the merge request needs to be reviewed, the development consultant is there. The developer and the automation consultant can also do this pair programming with the developer, help the developer, train developers, or also he can help QA analyst in the team to accomplish this. And also he will help the QA analyst to understand what test to automate. For example, sometimes we use the Gherkin scenario, we use the Gherkin language. Sometimes the automation engineer will train QA analyst to help them understand how to write the test in these Gherkin scenarios. So it was, so now it was much better for us. So that's great. So this completes the pre-alpha phase, I would say. So far, what we did is like we introduced the automation in the pre-alpha phase. So now the pre-alpha phase is done, the branch is merged to master, and now it is ready for release. So now let's look at the release creation process. And also we can look at all other process following that, but we can see all of them directly on our CI. I will take you to our GitLab CI where we can see all these different process. But as a side note, in some platforms, the whole release creation process and alpha, beta, and rolling out to production, the entire process is automated. So you don't have any manual intervention. But however, I would say it's very interesting to understand when there is a manual intervention, how it works. So today I will take you through our Android release validation process. And we also have some manual intervention in this one. So you will see. So like in the release validation phase, like we have 5 different stages. The build stage is where the application will be built and the release candidate will be ready. And once the release candidate is ready, it will move to the test phase. And once the test phase will be triggered from the build phase, we can do the testing on this release candidate. So it will automatically trigger the automated smoke tests, non-regression tests, and different kind of tests. If there are any issues, or if the smoke test fails, for example, then it will stop the release immediately. So if the smoke tests are broken, then it is an immediate attention, like we have to pay the immediate attention to say, okay, we fix this before moving further. Let's say smoke tests are great, like they're working fine, they're green, then we go to the non-regression tests. Like if the non-regression tests are failing, then we look at, it is not a blocker per se. Then what we will do is like we look into the non-regression test, we look into different issues that we have. If there are bugs, we look into the priority. If it is a very minor priority, we let it go. If it is not a minor priority, if it is a high priority, then we take actions. We stop the release. So, okay, we did the smoke test, we did the non-regression test, everything is successful and they are green, and it will trigger the test promote script. We have this test promote script actually to trigger a Slack notification into the QA channel. What it will do is it will trigger a Slack notification into our QA channel to say, hey, this build is ready for manual validation. It will also ping all our QA analysts that are associated for this platform, and it will give all the information that is necessary for the manual validation. You can see here, it will link you all the Jira tickets that is necessary. It will ping the QA analysts, and it will also give the different builds that needs to be tested. They can just click on this build and they have it without actually going into the CI, without actually asking someone. There is no intermediate communication, and we cut down a lot of time because of this. Okay, great. Now we have the Slack notification. Now the QA has all the information that needs to do the validation. The manual QAs will take this and they do the release validation. Okay, cool. The release validation went, and they have to come back to the CI to say, okay, it was great or it was not great. So manual QA is done with the release validation. Now they say the release validation is a failure. So what they have to do is they come to the manual QA stage and they have to click on the fail button. Like here you can see that we have like two different stages, like jobs. Like one is the manual QA failed, manual QA passed. They just have to come and click a button here to say the manual QA failed. If the manual QA failed, it will block the release validation, and then like we will start introspecting, okay, why the build failed, okay, what are the major bugs, and we will take action on that. And then if the manual QA test has been passed, then everyone is happy. Like it will send a Slack notification to say, hey, the QA manual validation phase is successful, and it will say this is done, and we are moving on to the next stage. And this is automatic. It can send a Slack notification, which will bring us to the last phase, which is the deployment phase. I think we already talked about the deployment phase, where we do the progressive rollout. So we initially roll out to the internal users, like we only release to the Dashlane internal users. And then once it is done, like we roll out to the beta users, and then we roll out to the production users. Like even the production users, like we have 5, 20, and 100%. To let you know, the entire deployment process as well is automated, and each phase will happen one after another. So you don't have to manually wait for manually trigger and lose time in this one as well. So throughout this process, like we'll also do the continuous monitoring to make sure that we don't have any exceptions, we don't have anything, so that we can continue the deployment phases. So far we saw how we run the different tests on the CI. Now let's look at what are these tests that we run on the CI. I think I already talked about the functional test, and it is very obvious test for all of you. So I will skip that part, and I will not talk in detail about that. But I will talk in detail about other kind of tests that we do on the CI. So one is that like we do the visual regression tests on the CI. Like for example, you can look at this image. The image is completely distorted, and you can see that it has like the worst user experience, for example. But at the same time, like the functional test may still pass. Like the functional test may see, okay, if the buttons are visible, if the elements are clickable, maybe the automation tool can actually click on this. However, from a user point of view, this is not a user acceptable experience. So it is really important to make sure that we don't lose any visual glitch, we don't lose any visual impediment when releasing the application. So we take care to do this visual regression test, both in terms of manual test and also in the alpha and beta phase. It's mainly visual regression test. So we use PERSI as a tool to do the visual regression test, and we do the comparison on the PERSI platform. And the next one is about the security test. You all know, like, it's really an important test set that you need to have. And we have like autofill hijack test. We have web vulnerability scanner to make sure that we don't have any vulnerability in our web applications. And we have the license check. We have the static code analysis. And we use like Arachne, Nexus, and SonarQube. And we use a lot of different tools, like for example, the pen testing and other things, but they are not part of the CI. For example, to do the security tests. And then we also have like some autofill test. I think this is a little bit specific to Dashlane, I would say. Dashlane has this feature called as autofill. We do the autofill on the top, like the websites, on different websites. What we do is like we do try to test the autofill feature on different websites. We try to check the autofill on the top websites that we normally use at Dashlane. So we try to do test on all of them, and we make sure that they are not broken. And we use XC test, Android UI Automator, and WebDriver IO to do these kind of autofill tests. So this is like very critical test, and which is like the usage log test. The log testing is really important for us. So just to let you know, like whenever you are using some applications, like most of the application, they will send some anonymous usage logs to the server. So these logs helps the application to understand, the company to understand which features are mainly used, which features are not used. So this will drive a lot of business critical decisions in the company. For example, in this example, what I'm showing you, like it's a password generator feature. Here you can see that like we click on the refresh button, we click on the copy button, and both will trigger an anonymous logs, and which will be sent to the server. So let's say, for example, we don't log the like refresh button. Like we click on refresh button, we don't log them. What may happen is like server don't receive anything. So when we try to analyze, we think that, okay, no one is using the refresh button. We may decide to discontinue having this button itself. However, the button could be very crucial for the application, or maybe this is something which everyone wanted. So it is really important to test them. So I think it's really interesting to understand how we test them and how we do it. Like I have a blog article link which I will share with you later. You can have a look at them, and it is really interesting. So I will not get into details of this, but I will share this one later. And the next one is the performance test. So we do a lot of performance tests, and this one is a bit special because these are the performance tests that we have integrated with the functional end-to-end tests. So whenever we run the functional end-to-end test, we also have some performance analysis that we do, and we do log them to the server. Like we do send these performance logs to the server, and we aggregate them in Kibana. The main thing is that we try to gather this performance analysis, performance test before rolling out to production. So whenever we are running the test in the test environment, whenever we are running a test application, we try to gather all the performance spikes or like we try to get together all the performance metrics to make sure that we don't have any performance spikes before rolling out to production, because any spike on the production can be very costly. So here you can see, like this is a snapshot from the Kibana dashboard. This is the iOS account first load time metric. And like we can also build a lot of dashboards in Kibana to help others understand what is the performance. So the next and the last in this section, which is about the load testing, and we use Gatling and Puppeteer load test tool. These are the two different tools that we use to do the load testing. And Puppeteer load test is mainly to test like a real user, like to do a load test like a real user, let's say. There are many metrics that we measure, like the response time of the website, server, endpoints, web applications, and APIs, many things. And we also do load tests on the account creation, the sync feature, and many other features that we have at Dashlane. So all good in there. So I would like to tell you about a crazy load testing experience that we had recently. We were getting ready for the Super Bowl advertisement campaign. I think many of you may know Super Bowl. Super Bowl is a famous American football league. So we were getting ready for that, and it's a really big thing in the US. So we anticipated around like 1 million visits for every minute. So we had to load test all our website, all our web applications, API calls, and everything. And we had very short time to do that. And we had to scale our infrastructure crazily to do this kind of load testing. It was really a very nice experience and challenging thing. And it was really great to do this load testing. And we did use Gatling mainly to do this load testing. And we used also the Puppeteer load test to do this load testing. So which will bring us to the end of different automated tests that we have on the CI. I'd say we also have like some other automation tests which I couldn't cover, like the API tests and other tests, but I think I have covered enough for now. Okay, now it is complete. Now we have a new process which is working great for us. But with the new process comes the new problems, and we did have new problems, and we do have some new problems as well, which are handling the inconsistencies and scaling the test infrastructure, and also the main thing I think which you may also agree with is about providing visibility of automation tests and the metrics, the automation metrics to everyone. I think this is very challenging among all three. So I'll explain each one of them to help you understand what it is. So we discussed about the new process, and we discussed about how great it is to have like many people contributing to the automation team, automation project, which is great because like we have more tests, we have more quality, everything is great. But the main problem, the main concern is that more people contribute to the project, we have more issues. Let's say some people say, okay, it works on my machine, it doesn't work on the CI. Some people say, okay, like it works on my machine, not on the automation engineer, or vice versa. And also sometimes it's very hard to debug these kind of issues because where we can debug it, because like if it is not working on the CI, it's really hard to debug. And if it is not working on one's machines and working on other machine, it's really hard to understand what went wrong. So I think the easy solution to do in this kind of situation is to Dockerize your test executions, Dockerize your builds. I think it's really easy to make sure that that the test environment is the same, whether you are running on your machine, whether you are running on CI, or whether you are running on a developer machine. Like wherever you run, you're running on the same environment setup, so you don't have any concerns with the environment and the setup that you are using. And for those of you who don't know Dockers, like they are like the virtual machines, they provide the ability to package your applications and run them in an isolated environment, which are called as containers normally. They really help you. Like you have to spend a little bit of effort to actually Dockerize your builds, but I can assure you it will bring a lot of value. And we currently have Dockerized most of our test applications. We have Dockerized our applications on all our like web applications are Dockerized, and also the Android application is Dockerized. However, the Apple platform is a bit tricky to do the Dockerization because like so far we didn't find a way to Dockerize the Mac and iOS applications, because it's also dependent mainly on the OS, and also dependent on Apple to give this capability for us. One day they will. And also on Windows, it's a bit tricky as well to do the Dockerization. But whenever you can, wherever you can, I would strongly encourage you to do Dockerize and try to have Dockerization. So the next thing I would say is scaling. I think everyone in some phase of your company, you will go through this issue. And also maybe even if your company is not big, like you may have like major releases. For example, if you have a major release like Super Bowl, like I explained to you before, or if you have like releases, you are often bound to go through this problems, like having a shortage of build machines. Like you have many things to test at the same time, you have no time, and you have no build machines that are available to run your test, which can be crazy. And it's not just for automation, it's also for development. The developers are all waiting for the builds, and the QA is also waiting for the builds. It's really difficult to get this build machines, and the long wait build queues can be very frustrating because you have many things to do in a short deadline. So scaling up and down can be a real problem. Let's say, for example, like we just wanted to do something for Super Bowl, and it was a one-day event, and let's say we bought like hundreds of infrastructure, hundreds of machines to do the testing to match this one. You cannot scale down like that. So you should have some kind of capability to scale up and scale down as you want. I think this is really crucial, and it can be a really pain, like if you want to scale up and scale down with your internal infrastructure, because it can be also very expensive. So what we use as a scaling for our scaling needs at Dashlane is we use Lambda test, which gives you capability to run the test like in parallel. Like for example, let's say like tomorrow you want to run just for tomorrow, like you want to run on 100 parallel executions instead of 10 parallel executions. It's completely possible with Lambda test, and you can scale down day after tomorrow just to 10 parallel runs. It's completely possible, which gives you a lot of flexibility to scale up and scale down your resources. And it will also open up a lot of other possibilities for manual QA analysts as well. Like for example, if you want like okay, I want Mac OS, and I want this particular OS version, and I want this browser, it can be tricky to find this combination of OS and browsers and all these things, and also especially on the mobile devices as well. When you want to test on a specific mobile device and a specific version of the mobile device and a specific brand, for example, it can be really complicated. But they provide the device farm, which will help you to go to any OS version or any build version that you want, and you can choose the build, and you can do the testing on that without actually buying them, and you just have to subscribe. So which is really helpful, which can bring you an additional capability for everything that you have. So I would encourage you to look into third-party cloud solution providers. There are many in the market now. So that brings us to the last part of this talk, which is about the visibility of the automation test and metrics. I think this can be a bit tricky, especially because like automation engineers, they are working on the code, and they are working on the CI. On the automation tests are running on the CI. However, the manual tests are running on like Jira mainly, or like sometimes on your test management tool. It can be tricky because like whatever runs on the GitLab CI will not be reflected on the Jira. So the QA analyst, they will have very less visibility on what's happening on the automation side, and the automation engineers at the same time, like, they will have less visibility on what's happening on the QA side. And also at the same time, it's not just QA and automation. There's also this project owners, product managers, everyone. They lack the visibility of the automation. We found a real need to make the automation to be appearing in Jira. So what we did is like we did GitLab and Jira integration. So we used X-Ray APIs to do this integration. For those of you who don't know, X-Ray is a test management Jira plugin. They also have a tool. This is what we use at Dashlane for our test management. And we use Jira for bug treatment and for the project management as well. So we did the link between GitLab and Jira with the X-Ray, and it was really cool because with this, like, we could derive a lot of metrics. We could understand, like, for example, we could build a QA dashboard, and the QA dashboard helps us to understand what is the current coverage, what is the coverage that we are missing, what is the automation tests that are running every day, which tests ran, like for example, which test ran yesterday, which test failed yesterday, which will also give a visibility for QA analysts to examine further, like, okay, this is a test which is failing on the automation side. Maybe they can look into they can do some exploratory testing on their side to make sure that there is no bugs that we are missing at this stage. And it also gives better visibility for the whole company, for the developers, because like we are expecting everyone to contribute. So we should also provide enough metrics and visibility for everyone in the company for them to track and understand what's going on the automation side. So it is a really quick criteria for you to make automation in the teams, or like automation accessible to everyone. You should make sure that your automation metrics and automation coverage is visible to everyone. Well, I think that brings us to the end of this talk. Thanks a lot for everyone for listening to me so patiently so far. Please feel free to try Dashlane. Like here you have also a small gift, which is a 6-month premium code for everyone who attended the conference today. And you can use this code to get a 6-month premium. And now I'll be ready to take your questions.
Thank you, Sagar. That was quite impressive, I must say. That's a great job. Which leads to the first question, which was, how long did it take to establish all this pipeline?
How long did it take to establish all this pipeline? I think, how long? Like, I think like 4.5 years. I think like we were establishing the pipeline all along. It's not like one day job. But if you are asking about only on the development stages, because there are multiple things. Like if we go back to our slide on, yeah, I think I would say it's a continuous process, but setting this up, I think it didn't take us a lot of time, because introducing the automation in the development branch, it was not so complicated, because like we already had the full regression test set which was running on the master. So what we had to do is like we had different, we split them into different jobs. We also split the full regression test into multiple jobs so that they can be run in parallel. And we implemented the smoke test and the regression test. It was just writing the YAML files in the GitLab to make sure that they run, and we enable these triggers on the CI.
To put the pieces together, actually.
Yeah.
Okay. Another question was regarding the beginning of your presentation, I guess. Question from Pierre. You use Cypress and Selenium and Puppeteer. Why is that? It seems very complicated to use and maintain them all.
Yeah, I agree. It is. But as I explained to you, I think we are trying to simplify it. Let me go back to the slide. We are trying to simplify it a lot. Like our main thing currently, we are trying to simplify everything when we are trying to stick only with the WebDriver and Cypress. Cypress is something that we are using on website, and it is really great because we run on the headless way, and it is very easy to run this test, and the developer really loves this one, and they have taken the ownership on writing this test, so it's great. It's working for us, but we still have to depend on the WebDriver IO, which is based on Selenium, mainly because like we have the standalone extensions, and like for standalone extension, we have to load the extension, and we have to deal with the different tabs. I think all these headless browsers, like our test automation tools, like Cypress, and we also have like Puppeteer and all these tools. Like we did a talk on all of them, but the main challenge is that we cannot deal with multiple tabs, and we cannot deal with different elements inside the extensions, which is a bit complicated, which is the reason why we have different tech stacks. Because we also have a lot of different web tech stack. Like we have different web applications and extensions, and it's a bit complicated tech stack actually. So I agree, and we are trying to simplify it. So today we are trying to only simplify the programming languages to TypeScript and JavaScript. We are trying to get rid of all the Ruby-based things and Python-based things, which is more homogeneous to what the developers are using today. And also the tools, we are trying to simplify it, and maybe one day if Cypress or Puppeteer say, okay, we do support them, we will go to these tools and simplify it even further.
Okay. We have another question from Pierre, which is, if you only automate happy path tests, where do you test errors? With integration tests?
So actually it is like it doesn't mean like we only automate the happy path test. Here, I think the thing is, here we are expecting developers to add the automated tests. Like here we are expecting the developers to add the happy path tests. Like we are only expecting the developers to add the happy path scenarios, because you cannot expect them to add all the edge cases and everything. If we ask them to do this, so like they have to stop the development and they have to only do this. So it is still the responsibility of the automation engineers to make sure that we add all the edge cases. We can cover all different kind of tests, like, because here we are only talking about the functional test. We also need to have like a API test. We have to have the performance and different kind of capabilities. Like it will be still the role of the automation engineer to do these things. However, we are only expecting the developers to add this happy path test, which still helps us a lot in terms of the coverage, because the developers helps us in terms of like at least adding these basic scenarios and maintaining their branches, which is really helpful for us to increase our coverage and focus more on adding different kind of capabilities. Thank you.
Okay. We now have a question from Wael. How failures are analyzed for smoke test triggered by the merge request? Is it the dev who analyze these errors, or is it the QAs, or maybe the automation?
Well, actually, at this point, like the automation involvement is very less. Like we don't want automation engineers to be heavily involved at this process. So it's basically when the smoke test fails, the developer build fails. Like it forces the developer to actually look into the broken tests, because like they cannot proceed without actually having the smoke test green. So which will force them to actually look into the tests and analyze them. If they don't understand, if they cannot fix it, okay, they will go to the automation consultant they have in the team. They ask them, okay, can you help me with that? And the automation engineers will of course help them. But the main idea is to give more ownership to developers in the mission teams, and giving them, the main thing is like what we are trying to do is we are trying to give more tools and capabilities for them to actually do the things by themselves.
Yeah, makes sense. We have another question from Wael regarding visual regression testing. Are you using reference images or is it more AI driven? Maybe both.
Well, actually, the AI driven is very limited on Percy, I would say. Like maybe you're actually using like baseline image, and they have their own visual regression AI based comparison, which is okay-ish. It's not that extraordinary, I would say. Like sometimes we have to still look into it and understand, okay, this is actually a failure. I would say partly AI driven, but it's mainly from the Percy side. And on our side, it's we just passed. We have the baseline image, and we just try to compare it from our side.
Yep. We have a few more questions. Do you parallelize tests?
Of course, we do like parallelize them, because I think it's mainly like I think when I explained the Dockerization, it's really important for us to run the test in parallel, because we have a lot of tests, and as I told you, like different people are contributing to tests, and the test set is really increasing, and we want to run them also in a short duration, because you see that it is part of the development pipeline as well. If the tests are taking more time, like everyone goes crazy. Hey, like my build is not much to master. What can I do? So we have a lot of problems, and like we have a lot of need to have the test in parallel. So we do parallelize them, and we split them into different jobs, and we do the run each jobs into different parallel runs, and each job is actually split into different simulators sometimes, and sometimes into different jobs as well. Like we also heavily use Lambda tests to do parallelize our tests, which helps us as well to do the parallelization.
Okay. Regarding the performance and load tests, did you consider using JMeter, or did you choose Gatling by default? That's for load tests.
Well, we did the POC between Gatling and JMeter, and well, Gatling was much cool for us, like because it was based on Scala, and our team was like excited to use the tool, and it also had a lot of different capabilities to actually like have the response time, and scaling up, like provisioning into different AWS was like much easier with Gatling. So we used Gatling as a tool, because it was much simpler for us, and it was more like you have more capabilities, and you have more easy way to have the load balancing with Gatling, is what we felt, and from our POC that was our understanding, which is why we chose Gatling.
Okay, we have a last question from Pierre. What is your acceptable build time? My team went for 20 minutes tops. And what's your limit?
Yes, acceptable build time. I would say like our acceptance test. It's a bit tricky, because again, like I think we have to go back to the release validation. So it is different on different platforms. Like I would say, like it's great on some platforms. It's still like we have to do a lot of work on some platforms. But I would say on some platforms it's like 20 minutes. Some platforms it's more than 40 minutes. But we are trying to minimize the time which it takes to do this validation. But sometimes it's really important. We run all of them to make sure that we don't miss any bugs, and also like we don't have enough parallelization on some of the platforms, for example, which makes it a bit complicated to achieve lesser release time, lesser build time as well.
Okay, thank you. And that was our last question. We are perfectly on time. So thank you very much for your presentation and all these answers. And I think it's time for me now to give the microphone back to Yann to conclude this evening.
Merci
Thanks a lot,
beaucoup,
everyone.
Arnaud. Merci beaucoup, Sagar, pour ta présentation. Du coup, juste un petit mot pour la fin, pour vous remercier tous. Un énorme merci aux speakers, parce qu'on a encore passé une soirée qui était top. Un merci au public, parce qu'il y a moins de monde maintenant, jeudi soir, que lundi soir, mais c'est normal, et on est quand même très content de voir qu'il y a encore pas mal de gens qui sont restés jusqu'au bout. Un merci à toi, Arnaud, d'avoir animé cette soirée, et à tous les autres animateurs de ces derniers jours. Et puis mon dernier merci, il va aller aux organisateurs, tout simplement parce que c'est la deuxième année qu'on fait ça, c'est la deuxième année qu'on le fait sans sponsor, qu'on continue de le faire de façon bénévole. Et je pense, et j'aimerais bien qu'on puisse continuer là-dessus les années qui suivent. On verra si on est encore confiné l'an prochain et si on doit continuer de le faire à distance, ou si on pourra faire une édition quelque part en France. En attendant, juste deux petites infos. Si vous voulez nous passer un message, là vous pouvez le faire dans le chat, et on vous enverra un questionnaire probablement dans les jours qui viennent, une fois qu'on se sera un petit peu reposé, qu'on aura dormi, dans lequel on vous demandera votre avis sur cette édition, et puis aussi des idées potentiellement pour les éditions à venir. Moi, j'ai pas forcément grand-chose à dire de plus. Je sais pas si un des organisateurs veut prendre la parole, et sinon je vous souhaite à tous une excellente soirée, une excellente semaine, et puis probablement l'année prochaine.
Juste merci à tout le monde d'avoir participé. Ça nous fait plaisir d'avoir vu du monde tous les soirs, et je pense que les speakers ont apprécié aussi. Merci beaucoup.
Merci à tous, bonne soirée.
Merci, bonne soirée.